Do you remember a time when you changed your mind and saw the world in a completely different way? We often want to be right, but what if the real secret to growth is not having all the answers, but learning to rethink? In his book, Think Again, Adam Grant takes us on a powerful journey inside the mind, showing us that our greatest strength is not fixed knowledge, but the ability to question, unlearn, and discover new perspectives. This book is not just about thinking, it's about rethinking everything you thought you knew. If you're ready to open your mind, let go of rigid ideas, and explore how flexible thinking can transform your life, then this journey is for you. Chapter 1: A Preacher, a Prosecutor, a Politician, and a Scientist. In this opening chapter, Adam Grant shows how we often take on different roles in our thinking. Sometimes we act like a preacher, defending our beliefs as if they are sacred. Other times we act like a prosecutor, focusing only on proving others wrong. And often we play the politician, trying to win people's approval even when we are not fully convinced ourselves. The problem with these roles is that they make us more focused on protecting our image or winning arguments rather than finding the truth. When we stick to them, we stop listening and close the door to new ideas. Grant invites us to think more like scientists. A scientist does not see changing their mind as weakness. Instead, they treat it as part of the process of discovery. They test ideas, remain curious, and update their views when new evidence appears. Chapter 2: The Armchair Quarterback and the Imposter. This chapter introduces two common mindsets. On one side, there is the overconfident expert who believes they know everything. On the other side, there is the imposter who doubts themselves even when they are skilled and capable. Both ways of thinking can hold us back. Overconfidence can blind us to mistakes and stop us from learning. On the other hand, constant self-doubt can keep us from taking opportunities we are ready for. The key is to find balance, enough confidence to act, but enough humility to keep learning. Grant reminds us that the most successful people are not those who are always right, but those who are willing to keep learning, adjusting, and growing. True wisdom comes from staying curious, not from pretending to have all the answers. Chapter 3: The Danger of I'm Right. In this chapter, Adam Grant explains how being too attached to our opinions can blind us. When we believe we are always right, we only look for information that confirms what we already think. This is called confirmation bias. The problem is that this mindset closes our minds and stops us from learning. Instead, Grant suggests we treat our opinions like temporary theories that can be updated. Just like scientists, we should see changing our mind as progress, not weakness. Main idea: true strength comes from being able to rethink and change when new evidence appears. Chapter 4: When Knowledge Isn't Enough. Here, Grant shows that facts alone don't change minds. We often think if people just knew the truth, they would agree with us. But usually, people resist facts when those facts challenge their identity or beliefs. A better approach is to ask questions instead of pushing arguments. Questions invite people to reflect, while facts alone can feel like an attack. Grant also reminds us that listening and respect are more powerful than simply giving information. Real change happens when people feel understood, not when they are overloaded with evidence. Chapter 5: Dances with Foes. In this chapter, Adam Grant explains how we usually argue to win, not to learn. When we treat conversations like battles, We push people away instead of bringing them closer. The goal should not be to defeat the other person, but to understand and maybe help both sides rethink. Grant suggests using curiosity instead of aggression. Instead of saying you're wrong, we can ask questions like, what makes you think that? This opens space for dialogue. When people feel respected, they are more willing to consider new ideas. Another key point is that shouting facts rarely changes minds. People resist when they feel attacked. By showing empathy and asking thoughtful questions, we turn debates into opportunities for discovery. The main lesson: the best conversations are not fights to be won, but dances where both sides move and adjust. Chapter 6: Bad Blood on the Diamond. This chapter shows how conflicts often grow because of pride and stubbornness. When we refuse to let go of our positions, small disagreements can turn into lasting rivalries. Holding grudges only makes it harder to learn and move forward. Grant points out that rethinking is easier when we separate our identity from our opinions. If we see being wrong as part of growth, then conflict becomes less threatening. We stop defending our ego and start focusing on the truth. He also explains that forgiveness and flexibility help us resolve disputes. Instead of trying to win every argument, we should aim to find common ground. This creates space for trust and cooperation. The main lesson: clinging to pride keeps us stuck, but humility and openness allow us to rethink and repair relationships. هل تريدني أتابع معك نفس الأسلوب وألخص لك الفصل السابع والثامن أيضاً؟ Chapter 7: Vaccine Whisperers and Mild-Mannered Interrogators. In this chapter, Adam Grant explains how trying to change people's minds with force or too much logic often fails. When we push too hard, people become defensive. Instead, he shows that asking gentle, curious questions is much more effective. For example, he tells the story of vaccine whisperers in Canada. These were health workers who didn't argue or shame parents who feared vaccines. Instead, they listened carefully, asked calm questions, and created trust. Many parents ended up changing their minds not because of pressure, but because they felt respected. Grant compares this to being a mild-mannered interrogator. Instead of attacking someone's beliefs, you invite them to explain their reasoning. This often makes people realize the gaps in their own arguments. Main lesson: minds rarely change through fighting. They change when people feel safe, listened to, and guided to rethink for themselves. Chapter 8: Charged Conversations. This chapter focuses on difficult conversations about sensitive topics like politics, race, or identity. Grant explains that these discussions often turn into heated battles because people feel their values are under attack. He gives the example of a Black musician, Daryl Davis, who managed to befriend members of the Ku Klux Klan. Instead of fighting them with anger, he listened and calmly questioned their beliefs. Over time, many KKK members gave up their robes because of his patient conversations. Grant also points out that when emotions run high, listening becomes even more important. A charged conversation is not about proving who is right, but about building understanding and trust. Main lesson: even in the toughest conversations, empathy and patience can break down walls that facts and arguments cannot. Chapter 9: Rewriting the Textbook. Adam Grant talks here about how knowledge keeps changing. What we believe today might be outdated tomorrow. If we hold too tightly to old ideas, we risk falling behind. That's why it's important to stay open to rewriting what we know. He gives the example of astronomy. For centuries, people believed the Earth was the center of the universe. When scientists discovered that the Earth revolves around the sun, it changed everything. This shows how big breakthroughs come from rethinking, not from holding on to old beliefs. Grant also mentions that in schools and workplaces, people often rely on outdated textbooks or training. If we don't update our mental textbooks, we can't keep up with reality. The chapter reminds us that wisdom is not in memorizing facts, but in being ready to update them when the world changes. Chapter 10, That's Not the Way We've Always Done It. In this chapter, Grant looks at how traditions and routines can trap us. Many people stick to habits just because that's how we've always done it. But if we never question these habits, we miss chances to improve. He shares the story of NASCAR pit crews who once worked in a slow, traditional way. Later, they learned from the techniques of Formula One teams, who were much faster and more efficient. By rethinking their approach, pit crews transformed the sport. Grant also talks about companies that failed because they resisted change. For example, Blockbuster refused to rethink its business model when Netflix appeared. This stubbornness led to its collapse. The chapter highlights that progress depends on challenging traditions and finding better ways, even if it means letting go of what feels comfortable. Chapter 11, Escaping Tunnel Vision. Adam Grant explains that when we are experts in something, we can get stuck in tunnel vision. We focus so much on one way of thinking that we miss other possibilities. Expertise can be useful, but it can also blind us to new ideas. He gives the example of Kodak, the famous camera company. They actually invented the first digital camera, but ignored it because they were focused on film photography. Their tunnel vision caused them to fall behind and eventually lose their place in the market. Grant also points to scientists who discover breakthroughs not by knowing more, but by looking at problems differently. Outsiders sometimes solve problems faster because they are not trapped in expert assumptions. The chapter shows that keeping an open mind and looking outside our own field can help us discover better solutions and avoid failure. Chapter 12, Breaking the Collective Echo Chamber. Here, Grant discusses the danger of echo chambers, groups where everyone thinks the same and only repeats what others say. In these spaces, people stop questioning and simply agree, which makes it harder to see mistakes. He gives the example of NASA's Challenger disaster. Some engineers had doubts about the launch, but in the echo chamber of the organization, their warnings were ignored. The result was a tragic accident that could have been prevented. Grant also talks about how social media creates modern echo chambers. People often follow only those who share their views, which makes their beliefs stronger but also more narrow. The chapter encourages us to surround ourselves with people who challenge us, not just those who agree. This helps us see blind spots and make wiser decisions. Think Again by Adam Grant. In Think Again, Adam Grant reminds us that the greatest strength is not holding tightly to our beliefs, but learning how to let go and rethink. From the first chapters, he shows how we often act like preachers, prosecutors, or politicians, defending our views, attacking others, or seeking approval, instead of acting like scientists who stay curious and open to new evidence. Throughout the book, we see the dangers of overconfidence, tunnel vision, and echo chambers. Whether it's experts who refuse to update their knowledge, companies that fail to adapt, or individuals who fear looking wrong, the message is clear. Stubborn certainty limits growth. while humility and curiosity fuel progress. Grant also highlights how meaningful conversations can change minds. By asking thoughtful questions, listening carefully, and respecting others, we can build trust and encourage people to rethink for themselves. Arguments rarely convince, but empathy and dialogue often do. The stories in this book, from vaccine whisperers to innovators, from leaders to ordinary people, show us that rethinking is not just a skill, but a mindset. It helps us learn, unlearn, and relearn in a world that is always changing. In the end, Think Again teaches us that wisdom is not about always being right, but about being ready to change when the truth demands it.